I did a series about this, which is reminding women that for the vast majority of our history, women have been the initiators. They've just initiated indirectly with plausible deniability. So, the most stereotypical example, maybe you'll appreciate this given your culture, is the dropping of the handkerchief of the Victorian lady as she's walking in the park. And she sees in the corner of her eye an attractive man that she might want to initiate a conversation with. And as she's passing by his bench, without noticing, the handkerchief falls out of her pocket, which creates an opportunity for the man to notice it, pick it up, and say, "Excuse me, miss, but I believe you dropped this." "Oh my, how absolutely clumsy of me. My goodness." And suddenly, boom, she's in a conversation with a man that she chose to have a conversation with. And if for whatever reason the guy turns out to be a total dolt, she could just say, "Oh, thank you for this, but I'm late for tea." And she can just kind of scamper off because she has the plausible deniability that she didn't do this on purpose.
So women do it with their eyes and stuff.
That's what I say. It's like the come hither stare. And I did it really badly in that episode, but I was trying to demonstrate what that might look like.
Mhm.
Eye contact is extremely intimate. One of the
Mm.
things I say in that episode that I don't think many women know is that if you and I didn't know each other and we were out at a bar and I just like looked right into your eyes for 3 seconds,
I think you wanted to fight.
exactly. Even there's this nervous laughter, which can potentially cover, okay, this is getting a little tense.
Mm.
And maybe I'm trying to de escalate it by smiling and showing that I'm not a threat.
Mhm.
But absolutely, sustained eye contact between two strange men is an aggressive tactic. For more than a couple seconds, it's gonna be like, "Can I help you? Is there a
Mm.
problem here?"
Mm.
He just looked at you, you know? Um, and why? Because it's too intimate. I don't know who you are, dude. Why do you think that you can get that close to me? You could be on the other side of the bar, but eye contact, it feels like you're inside me. It's amazing. So women can use eye contact to their benefit, where they can basically call the men that they want to interact with to them, but they have to be willing to do that. If they're not willing to drop the handkerchief or look them in the eye, I mean, that's sort of like the minimum necessary behavior.
This is a very interesting take because it really gets to the heart of the difference between how we interact with people, not just in dating, in the modern world versus how people used to interact in the older world. In the older world, they utilized plausible deniability a lot more than we do because they minimized social risk. That was sort of the underlying nature of the way that they interacted with each other. It had to be because of the risk that they had to take on every time they approached another person, which is not an easy task, especially for an introvert, and especially when it comes to making romantic overtures. In the new world, we have a priority of maximizing social opportunity, and this is in direct conflict, or it contrasts what we used to do of minimizing social risk. Because the more opportunity we expose ourselves to, the less we are able to manage the risk. It's almost like this blunt, direct approach where we get our answer and we move on. But it's important to note that moving on does not come without cost. It comes with a huge emotional toll. And I would argue that this is a big part of the reason why we have difficulty not only in socializing, even outside of the dating environment, but also why men and women are always seemingly at each other's throat, especially online. Maybe I just live online too much these days, but it does seem as though the temperature on the tension between men and women is ever increasing. And I'm sure there's many other reasons for it, but I would bet that this is one of the bigger reasons. The old days where plausible deniability was used allowed people to save face and preserve their dignity even while being rejected. And this worked both ways, not only for the person who was making the overture, but also the person who was being, also the person who is rejecting them. So the person making that overture can pretend it never happened and save her self-esteem. The person making the rejection can also pretend that he never saw that overture being made and preserve his own, what would you say, compassion, and also allow her to save her self esteem in doing that. So it's this mutual, indirect, subtle, vague, and even impersonal game that we play or we used to play with each other that allowed us to be able to expose ourselves to risk without feeling so crippled by it as we do today. So, in spite of it being impersonal and vague, as I was describing it as, that does not translate to, what would you say? It doesn't translate to bad, right? This is something that we had to do given our natural emotions that are elicited when we get rejected or when we have to reject someone. These were sort of tools that allowed us to be able to communicate effectively, if indirectly. It was a sort of strategic ambiguity that allowed us to navigate difficult or risky social situations, the likes of which so many of us run away from these days. In contrast to the old world, the new world is one that is far more blunt, far more direct. It gives us a binary choice of, am I interested in you or am I not interested in you? And that person has to swallow their pride to be able to even ask the question in the first place. Now, the fact that it is online dating apps, to be specific, which have symbolized the way that we interact with each other these days, gives us that illusion, I would say, of subtlety and indirectness. But it is an illusion because we are still getting that direct response. To swipe on enough people and not get many matches in return, especially as a man on these apps, or I should say, as most men on these apps, is quite humbling at best and humiliating at worst. And this is something that I think we all feel the weight of in the new environment that we're dealing with. Even if you get as far as to go on a date, you're, I think a lot of us are weighed by that knowledge that we don't know this person. We're supposed to jump headlong into that frigid water of flirting with someone who we just met and pretending as though there has been some romantic interest that's been brewing all along over a period of time that we've gotten to know each other that doesn't exist. And I think the reason it feels this way is because we did not evolve to deal with these technologies, to utilize these technologies that we have. We've evolved the emotions that we have and the reactions and responses that we have in a world where face to face interactions were 100% of the interactions, to a world where now it is no longer, and especially in this sensitive environment of dating. What this ends up causing is a feeling of dehumanization. We are all reduced to our profiles, not only as the one swiping through people as though they were used cars, but also being rejected by people as though we are a used car ourselves. And this is not a very pleasant feeling for most of us. There's this phenomena called the rejection mindset, which is essentially the same thing as choice paralysis, just in the dating environment. Because choice paralysis is this idea, is this phenomena that happens when we have an unlimited amount of choices. And what happens is that the quality of our choices naturally goes down because there's no way we are possibly able to assess the costs and benefits of all the choices that are at our disposal. Not only does the quality of our choice goes down, but our own emotions about whether we made a good choice, that too is affected by it. Never mind the objective value of what it is that we have. That objective value is essentially obliterated by the amount of choices that we anticipate we might have had otherwise, or the amount of whatever it is, value that we might have gotten had we picked something else. And this directly translates into the dating world, specifically with online dating, where we essentially have an unlimited amount of options, or at least the illusion of having an unlimited amount of options, which is effectively the same thing. And what happens is that regardless of which opportunities, which people that we match with, there's always that feeling that that's not good enough, that there's something more out there. And that hounds us and destabilizes whatever relationships that we are able to form if we even give them a chance in the first place. As a result of this pessimistic and critical way that we approach interactions, we end up rejecting more and more people. And these people are themselves fallen into that same trap and rejecting more and more people. So the overall volume of rejections for everyone starts to increase. It's not so surprising anymore that we start to resent each other. So which one of these is better? Not to cop out, but I actually think it's a matter of perspective. And here's why. With the old world, we had this social lubricant that allowed us to navigate these high social stakes situations where we were forced to talk to each other in person with all the imperfections in our communications and expressions. We had to deal with all of that. We had to confront it head on. And we also lived in a world, crucially, with low opportunity. Now we have a new style that is essentially a social market, one with an unlimited amount of opportunity. But on the other hand, we have a low social risk. That might seem like a good thing, or that might seem like a bad thing, but the opportunities should really not be underestimated. It might be easy to say now that we live in this world with social opportunities, noticing all the negatives that has come along with it, or the trade-offs, I should say, as something that is not ideal. However, I'm quite sure that the people in the old world were looking forward to the future, to a world where they had even more opportunities. And I'm sure most of them, if not a lot of them, would have been happy to sacrifice their high stakes situations for a world where that was easier. And I would argue that the fact that we're even where we are today, the fact that people from old times are always aspiring to create more abundance, I think it's almost a natural part of who we are to let go of difficulty, to let go of risk, to let go of our difficult emotions and seek convenience and seek abundance. Our new world is designed to sort through a high volume of options, and we have tacitly accepted that our emotions, the cost of our emotions being rejected, is a necessary price that we pay for the abundance that we enjoy. And even if it's not tacit, even if we don't want it, it's the world that we live in. And I believe this tension, this difficult high wire act where we have to balance, somehow we have to preserve the social lubricant that naturally came about through the interactions that we were, dare I say, forced to engage with, versus this new world where we have so much convenience and so much abundance. And as nice as that is, we seem to be sacrificing something so crucial to the way that we communicate with each other. Or I should say, communication itself seems to be what is sacrificed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. How do you go about balancing risk with opportunity? How do you preserve or even learn the skills that a riskier world teaches us? In a world where the risk is low, the opportunities are high, but the lessons that we learn from the risks are still as crucial, if not even more crucial.